we talked a little bit about your early life and what it was like as a young boy of 10 or 11 years old to be relocated, taken from your community and moved into an internment camp. Um, and that, of course, happened to thousands of Japanese American families. The and yet, rather than bitterness that I think you would have been entitled to the United States, you came back and gave back in public service in a variety of ways and continue to give back. Did that early life or those early experiences, you think, affect your outlook on public service, or why you thought it was very important to be involved in it?
No question it did. We also had an individual who was an immigrant from Japan who said that what happened to the Japanese American community should never ever happen to anyone else again. And in 1946, as people were coming back from the camps to their communities, he said one of the reasons that the Japanese Americans were evacuated and interned, even though the total number was 120,000, was that we really didn't have access to the political leaders of those times. And he said we ought not to let that happen again. So in the San Jose area, this individual, and his name was I.K. Ishimatsu, Mr. Ishimatsu would go around collecting $1, $2 from people. Here they were just returning from camp, had nothing really to speak of. And then he'd buy maybe 2 tickets to the Lincoln Day dinner of the Republicans, 2 tickets for the Jackson Day dinner of the Democrats, and send 2 young Japanese Americans to those functions, because he wanted their visibility to be known and to then make some connection to the political leaders of those of the 2 parties in our area. Well, by about 60 or so, I became the beneficiary of one of those tickets as well. But again, I think your basic premise, Ron, that you talk about, to me it's always been amazing that something like this happens to 120,000 people, but there isn't any rancor or bitterness that came out of this. But there is a very, very strong conviction in the Japanese American community that something like this should never ever happen to anyone again. And so I think that's the beauty of it in terms of what Mr. Ishimatsu was trying to do, trying to develop people to be active in the community. I remember when it became possible that I might be appointed to fill a vacancy on the city council in San Jose. And I was talking to my dad about it because I was in business with him. I was a partner of his in the insurance agency and brokerage business. And he said, you know, I always wanted all of you children to be active in the community, but I never expected anyone to be in political office. And he said in Japanese, there's an old adage about if you're in politics, you're going to be like the nail sticking out on a board. And he said, you know what happens to that nail? It always gets hammered. And I always think, Papa, you were so right about being hammered if you are in politics. But by the same token, I think the evacuation and internment was an example of where people should have stood out, be ready to be hammered on a constitutional issue of that nature. And so I think I encourage people to be like that nail sticking out on the board.
If that gentleman had sent you to a Lincoln Day dinner instead of a Jackson Day dinner, would you be a Republican today?
Well, you know, Ron, I
You
was
went
a
to the
Republican.
Lincoln
No,
Day.
I was a Republican
Really?
until 19. I guess it was nine. In fact, it was 1960. Until then, I was Republican until the Kennedy-Nixon election.